Welcome to the Hightlight Culture, the show where performance meets perspective and the biggest moments in sports get the analysis they deserve. Here we go beyond the box score. We break down the plays that change games, the athletes who shape eras, and the stories that define this generation of competition, from the court to the field, from the locker room to the front office. If it impacts the game, we cover it with clarity, credibility, and culture. It has been a downright terrible opening stretch for the 2025 to 26 LA Clippers, between the aspiration scandal, the ensuing salary cap circumvention investigation involving Kawhi Leonard, and this week's messy public breakup with future Hall of Famer Chris Paul. There's been a steady stream of bad news coming from Inglewood. Not to mention the Clippers are 6 and 16 and 13th in the Western Conference. A disastrous start given a welcome respite by Wednesday's blowout victory over the Atlanta Hawks. LA's spot in the standings has already led to some league-wide angst. Remember, the Clippers infamously owe their 2026 unprotected first-round pick to Oklahoma City Thunder general manager Sam Presti and the defending champs. We might need to get everyone in the league on a Zoom and brainstorm some ideas to fix the Clippers, one executive joked. Invite everybody except Sam. The fact the Clippers don't control their draft pick makes this situation far more complicated. If they did, the process might be simple. Sink to the bottom and hope for lottery luck in a loaded 2026 NBA draft. What should the Clippers do? It's a question we pose to coaches, scouts, and executives across the NBA this week to get a sense of how league insiders would attack the nearly impossible situation facing the franchise. The Clippers have more than $50 million in expiring contracts, and in the apron era, that is the type of fodder that carries value as teams look to shed future money. They are light on draft assets. The Thunder also have swap rights to the Clippers' 2027 first-round pick and have just one distant first-round pick and 3 second-round picks available to trade. But as one rival executive told me, they can just wait for a blue light special. There will be teams who will be willing to dump players in 2 months, they said, guys who might be able to help them. The Clippers are less than $2 million from hitting the first apron and are hard capped, so they don't have much monetary flexibility. For their issues with the age of their roster and their lack of athleticism, their 2 best players have played pretty well, one West Scout said. I'm not saying James Harden and Kawhi are having career years, but they aren't the problem, and you expect Ivica Zubac will get hot. You give them a piece or two that helps them defensively, and you might have a different outlook. That blue light special comment was in line with what another West Scout brought up to me. They even named a specific player. What about Zach LaVine? They asked. LaVine would, in theory, check some boxes for the Clippers. The Sacramento Kings guard would give them a serious dose of scoring and athleticism on the wing. The franchise lost both after it traded Norman Powell to the Miami Heat over the summer. LaVine, 30, has a $49 million player option for next season before his contract expires, meaning it wouldn't cut into LA's clear ambitions to become a cap space team by the summer of 2027. He also shouldn't fetch anything more than a few of the Clippers' many expiring contracts. I'd argue the Clippers could even get an asset or two back from the Kings in such a deal, given they be saving Sacramento close to $50 million in salary next summer. That means the Clippers could be one of the few teams, if not the only team, interested in taking on LaVine, thanks in part to the hefty price when he presumably picks up next season's player option. That they could, in theory, be a fit only underscores the predicament in which the franchise finds itself. That's a bad situation, one West executive said. Arguably, the last time a team was in LA's position, picks leveraged into the future and an aging, struggling roster, was the Brooklyn Nets in the mid-2000s. That team chose to change lead executives, moving on from Billy King and hiring Sean Marks, who chose to acquire future draft assets and intriguing young players rather than chase wins. Different executives I spoke to this week both praised and excoriated the idea of the Clippers implementing that strategy. I would be trying to get rid of the old guys, bring in some young guys that I like, and let the consequences of the record being bad be what they may, said an Eastern Conference executive who pushed for the Clippers to take that path. But that doesn't strike me as what owner Steve Ballmer would do, which in the past has been the only thing I want to do is win and to try to be competitive, and I don't have interest in tanking.
Thanks, Kennedy. So, Hope, we have the latest in NFL news. Records in sports usually fall quietly, but what's happening with Myles Garrett right now feels different. We're watching someone who writes 25 on his wrist tape before games, aiming way past the current NFL sack record of 22.5.
Yes, Sarah. You know what's fascinating about that number? He's not just picking it randomly. He's already at 19 sacks this season, which is 6 more than his closest competitor.
And let's talk about how he's getting there, because the way he moves on the field is unlike anything we've seen before. Here's this massive defensive end doing Euro steps like he's playing basketball.
That's exactly what makes him so unique. He's completely redefining what's possible for someone his size. The Ravens' Patrick Ricard put it perfectly when he said Garrett moves like a small guy, but has the strength of a giant.
You know what really stands out to me? The way he's approaching this record chase. He writes, Maktub, it is written, on his cleats. It's like he's not just playing football, he's writing his own story.
Well, speaking of writing his own story, let's look at how he got here. He actually requested a trade from the Browns last season, but instead ended up signing a massive $160 million extension.
That's such an interesting turning point, because after recommitting to Cleveland, he's taken his game to an entirely different level. I mean, he's already passed Reggie White for most sacks before turning 30, and he's not even 30 yet.
The numbers are just mind-blowing when you break them down. He's facing double teams on 31% of his pass rushes, and he still managed to get 5 sacks in one game against the Patriots.
And here's what really gets me about that Patriots game. After putting up those historic numbers, he was absolutely devastated because they lost. He actually said he'd trade all those sacks for a win.
That really speaks to the complexity of individual achievement in team sports, doesn't it? Here's someone making history while his team is struggling with a 3-9 record.
You know what's remarkable about his approach? Before that 5-sack game, he insisted on taking every single practice rep, something his defensive coordinator said is basically unheard of for a defensive lineman.
So what do you think drives someone to push themselves that hard when they're already at the top of their game?
Well, from everything we're seeing, it seems to be this perfect storm of talent, preparation, and mindset. He studies film of other great pass rushers like Micah Parsons and Nick Bosa, constantly looking for ways to improve.
That level of dedication is clearly paying off. He's already had a 5-sack game and a 4-sack game this season. The analytics say he has a 61% chance of getting at least 1 sack in every game he plays.
And what's fascinating is how the legends of the game are responding to him. Lawrence Taylor, arguably the greatest defensive player ever, actually posted about Garrett on social media, saying he keeps offensive coordinators up at night.
Even Michael Strawn, whose record he's chasing, said on TV that he's hoping Garrett breaks it. That's pretty remarkable coming from someone who's held that record for over 20 years.
You know what's really telling? His defensive coordinator, Jim Schwartz, who's coached Hall of Famers like Ray Lewis and Calvin Johnson, is actually suggesting Garrett should be in the MVP conversation, not just Defensive Player of the Year.
Though realistically, what are the chances of a defensive player winning MVP in today's NFL?
Well, it hasn't happened since Lawrence Taylor did it in 1986, but what Garrett's doing might force us to reconsider how we value defensive players. He's not just getting sacks. He has 28 tackles for loss, which is the most by any player in their first 12 games since 2000.
The way his teammates talk about him is pretty telling too. His rookie teammate Mason Graham basically said he's fine with not getting his own sacks as long as Garrett gets the record.
And that support extends beyond his team. Micah Parsons, who's a competitor for defensive awards, is actually rooting for Garrett to break the record. That kind of respect from your peers is pretty rare.
Looking ahead, what do you think this means for his legacy in the sport?
Well, he's already being mentioned in the same breath as Lawrence Taylor and Reggie White, and he's still in his prime. His teammate Grant Delpit called him the greatest of all time, which might seem premature, but the numbers are starting to back it up.
Though it's worth noting that sacks only became an official stat in 1982, so we can't really compare him to some of the all-time greats from earlier eras.
That's true, but what we can measure is how he's changing the position right now. The combination of size, speed, and technique he brings to the field is forcing us to rethink what's possible for a defensive end.
And with 4 games left in the season, he needs just 4 more sacks to break the record. The analytics say he has about a 1.3% chance of doing it this weekend against the Titans.
But you know what's interesting about those odds? They're based on normal parameters. And what we're watching with Garrett this season is anything but normal. He's already had a 5-sack game, so who's to say he can't do it again?
That's what makes this so exciting to watch, Wei. We're seeing someone push the boundaries of what we thought was possible in the NFL.
And whether he breaks the record or not, I think we'll look back on this season as the moment when Myles Garrett went from being an elite player to being someone who changed the game itself. That's the real story here. Not just the numbers, but the way he's forcing us to reimagine what a defensive player can be.
Thanks, ladies. Next on the show, here's the latest Xavian. The greatest turnaround in college football history might be unfolding right before our eyes. Indiana, a program that until recently had lost more games than any other, is now the #1 seed in the playoff and hasn't lost a single game this season.
Yes, Mark. Well, that's absolutely remarkable when you think about it, and what makes it even more impressive is how they're doing it, dominating on both sides of the ball with the second-ranked defense in the country.
Looking at their quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, the numbers are just staggering. He's 3rd in total QBR and the clear Heisman favorite. Plus, they're converting nearly 56% of third downs while holding opponents under 29%. Those are championship-level statistics.
Though I have to point out one potential weakness that could come back to haunt them, those occasional big plays they give up. Even in games they've won handily, teams have broken off some long runs and passes against them.
That's exactly right. I mean, Old Dominion had touchdown runs of 78 and 75 yards against them. When you're facing elite offenses in the playoff, those kinds of defensive lapses could prove extremely costly.
Speaking of elite offenses, what do you make of Ohio State sitting there at number 2? Here's a team that was cruising until that loss to Indiana in the Big Ten championship.
Well, the Buckeyes are fascinating because they have arguably 2 of the best 5 players in college football, with Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs. But did you notice how conservative they played it in that Indiana game? That 4th quarter decision by Ryan Day to attempt a field goal instead of going for it on 4th and 1 from the 9-yard line was baffling.
It really seemed like they didn't trust their quarterback Julian Sand in that big moment. Despite his impressive stats this season, you can't play it safe against this level of competition.
And that brings us to Georgia at number 3. Talk about a team that's peaking at exactly the right time. Their defensive performance against Alabama in the SEC championship game was absolutely masterful, holding the Crimson Tide to just 209 total yards.
Though I'm concerned about their lack of explosive plays on offense. When you look at Gunnar Stockton averaging just 10.7 yards per completion, and that dropping to 9.5 against top 20 defenses, it could be a real problem.
You know who doesn't have that problem? Texas Tech at number 4. The transformation of their defense has been remarkable, from averaging an SP Plus ranking of 83rd over the previous 15 seasons to now being ranked 4th. And they've got what might be the best front 6 in the country.
Let's talk about that defense for a moment. They've allowed more than 2 offensive touchdowns just once all year. That's absolutely incredible at this level of competition.
Though their red zone offense could be their Achilles heel, scoring touchdowns on just 56% of red zone trips won't cut it against this caliber of competition. Against top 20 defenses, that percentage drops even lower to 36%.
What fascinates me most about this entire field is the mix of traditional powers and new blood. You've got Alabama making their 9th playoff appearance, Ohio State their 7th, but then you've got programs like Indiana, Texas Tech, and even James Madison, who was in FCS just 4 years ago.
And don't forget about Tulane. The Green Wave are having their best run since the 1930s. Though I have to laugh at their coach John Sumrall's brutally honest assessment, calling his team really sloppy, but finding ways to win games.
That first-round matchup between Oklahoma and Alabama at Oklahoma should be electric. The first ever playoff home game for the Sooners, and it's against the Crimson Tide. Though neither team is exactly peaking right now.
You're right about that. Oklahoma's offense has been dreadful, ranking 87th in success rate and 89th in points per drive, and Alabama hasn't looked like a playoff team since Week 8. But that's what makes this expanded format so intriguing. Everyone gets a fresh start.
Looking at the SP Plus title odds, it's fascinating that Indiana has the second best chance at 23.5%, and Texas Tech is third at 20.9%. This really could be the year we see a first-time champion crowned.
Though we can't forget Ohio State is still the favorite at 28.6%. The defending champs have all the pieces: elite talent, great coaching, and championship experience. But you're right, this feels like a year where anything could happen.
That's what makes college football so special, isn't it? The perfect blend of tradition and possibility, where new stories can be written while still honoring the sport's rich history.
And in just a few weeks, we'll start to see how it all unfolds. First-round games kick off on December 19th with Oklahoma, Alabama, and by the time it's all over, we'll either have crowned a first-time champion or added another chapter to one of college football's historic programs.
Well, if Indiana does win it all, it might be the greatest turnaround story in college football history. From all-time losses, leader to national champion, now that would be something truly special.
But first, they'll have to navigate an incredibly tough path, potentially facing the Oklahoma-Alabama winner, and then possibly Ohio State again in the championship. The expanded format means there's no backing into a title. You have to prove yourself multiple times against the absolute best.
That's what will make this championship so meaningful. Whoever wins it will have truly earned it through multiple tests against elite competition. There's no room for doubt or asterisks in this format.
And that's exactly how it should be. The toughest path possible to determine the best team in college football. Whether it's Indiana completing their fairy tale, Ohio State defending their crown, or someone else shocking the world, we're in for an incredible few weeks of football.